This is The Changelog, and I'm your host, Adam Stacoviak. We're a member-supported blog and podcast that covers the intersection of software development and open source. We shine a spotlight on what's fresh and new in open source. You can tune into this show live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern at thechangelog.com/live, and this is episode number 0.8.5, recorded April 16th, 2013. We're joined by myself, Andrew Thorp, Steve Klabnik, Kenneth, Reitz, and Jerod Santo. And if you found this show on iTunes, we're also on the web at thechangelog.com. If you're on Twitter, follow The Changelog, because that is us. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody. This is the official relaunch of the Changelog podcast. It's been since like August of forever ago. This show will now be broadcast live every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Time, which is actually 3 p.m. in Steve's land, because you're, where are you at, Steve?
I'm in LA at the moment.
You're in LA at the moment. So if you're in the Pacific time zone, it's 3 o'clock. If you're on the East Coast, guess what time it is? 6 o'clock. And we'll do this show live every Tuesday. We'll be having all the changeloggers on the show here and there. We'll have rotating guests. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll talk about software development, open source, and everything in between. So we bring our opinions. We bring a bunch of fun, and hopefully you join us live every Tuesday. But I'm joined by a bunch of awesome people this show. It's a bunch of changeloggers, as a matter of fact. The first person in that lineup is Andrew Thorp. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing good. Stack, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. We also have Jerod Santo on the call as well. Jerod, say hello.
Hello, hello.
We also have Steve Klabnik.
Yo.
Yo. And we also have, last but not least, Kenneth Reitz.
Hello, Adam.
So, are you guys excited that the changelog is back?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
As the first contributor, I am tremendously excited.
As a first contributor. You were the first, weren't you?
It was like many, many years ago.
Many years ago.
Back in my PHP days.
Wow.
Wow. So you've actually literally grown as a developer with the changelog. I mean, not with, but over the years.
Tremendously, yes.
Tremendously. Yeah, and you started out, where did you start out then, since we're just chatting about that quickly?
You mean like what company was I working for at the time?
Yeah, like what were you doing around the time when you first started working with the changelog?
Well, I've been using Python for many years and loving it, but only for like personal stuff. And then I was kind of learning web stuff with PHP, and I did this obscure framework called Groovy on Grails, which you may have heard of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was experimenting with that. It was a very dark time in my life.
A very dark time in your life. And so, since you mentioned it, you mentioned the dark ages of the changelog. We actually officially started the changelog November of 2009. That it was kind of a happy accident, I like to say, because Lynn and I were both kind of in unique places in our lives and in our careers, and we just happened to have some extra time, and we were both geeking out on open source at the time. You know, it was only maybe a year into GitHub being around, because they launched like the year before. So a lot of the recent culture that has become the norm was still fresh and still new, to use our own phrase. But it's kind of cool. So
This sounds super nerdy. I swear I just happened to run across this the other day. But Yehuda Katz is user ID number 4 on GitHub, and he signed up in February of 2009. So that's roughly when they went public, at least.
yeah.
And they have 3 owners, or 3 founders, so
Right.
he was number 1.
Yep.
He was number 1. Wow, that is so crazy, man.
Well, what's really crazy is I got on the GitHub train pretty quickly, and my number was in the like thousands. I mean, those users took off fast.
I signed up somewhere like October or November, and I was 35,000.
Yeah, I mean, that was just crazy how that just took off like that. But it's cool to see.
How do you find out your number, your ID?
You go to api.github.com/users/your username, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
That is correct. So, for example, I will paste this in IRC. Mine is that.
Oh, wow, sweet. I'm like 2933, so I was somewhat new, or somewhat in the early adoption stage.
I was really late. I'm 119,000.
Wow.
Yeah. It's because I'm not a Ruby guy.
It's crazy to look back at the last few years and just look at how much has changed. In a lot of cases, too, how for granted, I guess, we take things, you know. And that might be a backwards way of saying that, but, you know, nowadays, it seems, you know, if you find a library or if you hear about a project, 9 times out of 10, it's open source, right? 9 times out of 10, maybe even more than that, it's actually on GitHub and not something else or somewhere else. Right. And it's just kind of crazy to be in that world now. But back in those days, it was still kind of catching up. And I even remember being when it was like a feat for jQuery to have moved over, or even Rails to have moved from Subversion to GitHub, and what a big deal that was. It's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, you wonder, like, you know, I don't know what it was like for everyone else, but the path for me when I came out of college and just started to get in this world, you know, which, by the way, I got a computer science degree in college and didn't do version control once in college, which kind of is shocking. But for me, I got out and it's like the trend, you know, you go to Subversion, and then there was this bridge, the SVN Git bridge, and then we finally went to Git. It was just kind of cool to see that a lot of people I've come across now have kind of followed that same path if you were there. I mean, and then you meet the you know, the older people, not older, but people that have been doing this for longer that come from even further back in that tree in the CVS era. So it's cool to see.
One of the things that really opened my eyes about GitHub was when you'd land on the homepage of a project and you'd see the code sitting right there. Because I was always a SourceForge user, and like a user as in I would, you know, download software from there. Not that I use it for version control. Mm-hmm. But I never even realized that, like, you could get at the code for a lot of those projects, because it's just not emphasized in the UI, you know. And when I saw GitHub, and you'd land on the repo and you'd see the code right there, it was kind of eye-opening at the time, for me at least. Yeah,
I mean, if you used SourceForge back in the day, it's like you would get there to download whatever you needed to download. And were you ever really sure you were downloading the right version of what you needed on SourceForge, you know?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is when you go and pick a project and you want to download it, and it gave you like 1,000 different servers you could pick from all over the world, and none of them worked.
I'm like, I don't really care. I just want a link that will let me download this 1 megabyte application. I don't need it to be from next door.
I'm going to have to show you ads.
Yeah, and I'm in Omaha, so all the servers are kind of far away from me, but they're all kind of close. You know, being in the middle of America, everything's centralized. I was always sitting there just trying to figure out, like, which one of these am I closer to Chicago or St. Louis? I don't know.
Time lost debating.
Yeah, exactly.
So since this is like the very first show since like forever ago, right? It kind of makes sense to maybe not so much just like paint the history of like open source and software development and how it's changed over the last few years, or even just since the inception of the changelog. But like also to kind of rehash what we've done since January. So we relaunched this blog late January. It kind of sat dormant in this hibernation mode with mainly, I would say, just because we were all so busy. I mean, we all have been around and doing things and been involved, but just haven't had the time to really give the blog its attention that is needed. And I guess the easiest way to say it was just life. Life happens. But we relaunched the blog with in January, and one of the coolest things I think, and you know, hopefully listeners, you feel the same way, and readers of the blog, you feel the same way as well. But for a while there, and I even hear this too, and I might be jumping around a little bit, but for a while there, we, you know, somehow we had to make some level of money to make the changelog possible to do, because we always wanted to get to a point where we can pay the people involved and everyone here that you know, is writing for the changelog. It may not be a ton of money, but we're all at least getting paid, and that's become a good thing for us because it gives us some reason, I guess, to do it beyond just our open source contributions. But one cool thing we did was launch a membership. So if you care about the changelog, you want to be involved in the changelog and see it keep going, then you can go to thechangelog.com/membership and sign up. It's like $4 a month. It's not very expensive, but it helps us keep the lights on. It helps us produce more content. It helps us produce this podcast and grow. So we're all kind of doing that. But one thing we did that was maybe not unique to us, but we just like and we're not even mad at advertisers. We just didn't want to do it. And when I say we, that was really coming from, my desire to axe ads in the sidebar and to also axe ads here on the podcast, not because I don't like to advertise for good softwares and services out there, but just because I wanted to truly focus on the content. And when it came down to the membership, I wanted the customer, because if you look at it from a revenue standpoint, if the advertiser is the one that's always paying you to do whatever, they're really the customer. And I really wanted to flip that on its head and totally make content the king that it should have been in this situation, and get everyone back involved in the changelog and focused on creating great content. And that's been the key. So to make you the customer, we created memberships, which is pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's been so I came on the changelog, I don't know, I guess it was about a year ago now, maybe a little less than a year ago, and it's a work of love, or I don't know what's the phrase, a gift of love or whatever, and
labor of love.
A labor of love.
Labor of love. Yeah.
It was a labor of love.
Kind of a gift of love.
Yeah, a gift of love with Andrew Thorp. No, it was the labor of love for me, and I started doing it, and I never got I never got sick of writing. For a while there, towards the end of last year, I was kind of really the only one writing, and not that I got sick. Yeah. Not that I got sick of it or anything, but it just you get a little bit burnt out, you get a little bit tired, because this is not our full-time job. This is you work your full-time job, you come home, or for me, you walk to the kitchen, and you sit down and you think, like, do I want to write right now? And so being a labor of love, being something that we weren't being paid for, something that we weren't collecting any kind of revenue on, it's even for people that have the best of intentions, it will wear on you after a while. So, this is just an attempt to kind of keep it hot and fresh, and keep everyone excited about what we're doing. I'm working with Stack to just figure out how we can keep who's the most important, which is the readers, excited, and through that we want to keep all of our writers excited and happy to be doing what they're doing. So, so it's just a nice little, It's never going to be anyone's, no one's going to get rich off the changelog, but it's just a nice little incentive to, to keep it moving. And that's what we want to do. We want to avoid what happened from November to January, and we don't want it to go dark, because, you'd be surprised. Just, I recently moved to Nashville. I went to the Ruby group here the second day I was here, and I was talking to a few of the people, and one of the guys' name was Jeff, and he was just telling me, like, it's sad that the changelog went dark. Like, I loved the podcast, I loved the blog. It's sad to me that it went dark, and it was like, I told him, we really want to avoid that, because I've heard that over and over again from people at conferences, at meetups, at all this stuff. So, we want to avoid that. We want to keep this thing moving as far as we can.
Absolutely. Most important part of any open source project is sustainability.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Sustainability, and Andrew, you mentioned just like getting back into the groove. Like Kenneth, you mentioned you were one of the very first contributors to the changelog, and then Steve, I don't know when you came on, but I just remember reading something about you and Hackety Hack and Shoes, and it wasn't too long after Y disappeared, and you took on one of his projects, and you were blogging about how you really had a passion for writing. I'm like, I gotta get this guy on the hook, man. I'm like, we gotta get him. I didn't even know who you were when I reached out to you. It's kind of serendipitous, really.
I don't think I was anyone, but that's another thing altogether. But I thought I was the first, to be honest. But it doesn't matter who's the first. But it was cool. It was sweet to be able to have another place to write all the time. So it's not always like the most writing intensive stuff. Like sometimes I spend 2 or 3 days on a blog post, and I don't always do that for the changelog, because covering software is easier than writing like really in-depth cited things. But it's good to I love being abreast of what's going on, and being able to tell other people oh yeah, there's a sweet library that does this thing. So
right, yeah, Steve. I don't know if you know this. I think this is kind of funny, but when you started to do Rust, and to just get into it, which I'd love for you to kind of share with us a little bit. But it's, that I don't know if you even know this. This is going to sound awkward. I don't know how to phrase this, but I'm the one that reached out to you to help you with that. And do you know that?
Sweet. I don't think that I know that. No.
I'm the one that you gave access to the wiki, or to the repo on GitHub.
Oh,
and all that.
Yeah. I remember that that part of it. Yes, totally. It's so many. So right now I've been doing pair with me's all this week, and so I've been getting emails from tons of people who I like tangentially know. It's like, hey, this person I follow on Twitter a little bit like wants to hang out and pair, and so I started forgetting like who wanted to work on what. So. My brain has been in pair with me emails mode, but yeah, I totally remember you giving me a hand briefly with the Rust for Rubyist stuff, which is very helpful. So,
yeah, and I definitely want to keep going with that. I work, my day job is with Stack, so we've been super slammed lately. But I definitely want to keep going with that, and it's exciting. That Rust is something that just kind of watching it from the fringes has been real something to keep an eye on. It's been real exciting.
Yeah, I have some good stuff planned for Rust for Rubyists. Well, I should say not necessarily for Rust for Rubyists, but another project based on it. So we can absolutely talk about that. I'll just leave the teaser in this podcast right now, since I'm not really ready to talk about what I'm doing with it yet. But what were you saying? Is that who was saying something? I talked over them. I'm sorry.
It was me, Kenneth. I was wondering if you could tell us more about Pair with Me. I've never heard of it before. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah,
okay.
Me either.
So I'm super obsessed with Twitter, and by obsessed I mean I don't think about it. It's just like part of my consciousness. And so I was at a conference the other day. There were 3 Ruby conferences over the last 2 weeks or something, and they were all at almost the same time. And I saw a bunch of tweets that went out with this pair with me hashtag, and basically I saw some people tweet about it, so I tweeted like, yeah, I'd love someone to help out with Rails or Rescue if you want to pair with me, whatever. And I sort of put in the back of my head, like, figure out what that is later. And so it turns out that Avdi Grimm gave a talk at one of those conferences and had given a talk about pairing, and then said, I wanted to start this initiative called Pair With Me, where I get random people to program on the internet. So basically, I don't remember what the website is exactly, but there's some sort of Pair With Me and Avdi, and so basically it's just like you tweet with the Pair With Me hashtag, and people get back to you, and then you pair program in some capacity. So I did like 10 of them this week, something along those lines.
Wow.
For an hour or two.
Is there a repo for this then, or
yeah?
what is it?
I'll find it while we're talking. So I don't remember specifically what. Here's the repo. I'll paste this in the chat, but for those of you listening, it's avdi/ppwm pair program with .me is also the actual like website. Yeah, and so hopefully there will be more stuff at this website later. Right now, it's mostly just a list of resources and like a little badge that we can like share to say like I'm open with pairing on open source stuff.
So that's different than the pair with .me site.
Yeah, but there's been a bunch of things like this that have all sort of died out. So let's hope this one doesn't.
It seems like it'd be almost a opportunity to get integrated with Git tip or something like that.
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. I just had a chat. Why can't I remember his name?
Chad Whitaker?
Yeah,
Chad Whitaker.
I had a chat with him because, he's got so much passion for Git tip. And Kenneth, you could probably even speak to this because you're like in like the top echelon of people making money on, not making money, but getting paid for your open source contributions. Like, what's your take home nowadays, weekly?
On GitHub, I think it's like $70, but I give a lot of it away too to help sustain other projects.
That's awesome. And
yeah, it's amazing. It's really like I think one of the most important. I do a lot of experiments with sustainability and open source. So like requests, I have a thing called Request Pro, where if a company wants to financially contribute to the project, they can. And there's no difference. It's like the exact same code that they receive, but. And I've gotten some things through that, but like this by far is the most sustainable thing I've ever seen, and it's really exciting. I'm trying to see here, and then just this week at Heroku, I decided to start sponsoring some projects as Heroku's, and hopefully we start getting more companies involved. So just today, like an hour ago, I found out that Max CDN is also contributing $72 a week, which is super exciting to developers that are making open source. It's extremely exciting.
So what's the unique thing about Git tip? Is it just the recurring payments?
Yeah, basically you say, I want to give this much money to this person every single week, and its maximum is $24. per person. Usually you give like $1 or $2, and then over time that really adds up because it's weekly. If you're giving someone $5 a week, that adds up to $250 in a year. So if 100 people are doing that to you, that's a big difference.
So you give it directly to people and not specific projects?
Correct. It's to the developers. And ideally, it doesn't have to even be about developers. It can be about anyone that's creating anything.
Cool.
It's
the goal
Twitter
is to
account
change
or
the
a GitHub
world.
account. Yeah.
Yeah, or a Twitter handle. I'll paste the link in.
Yeah.
And we should get Chad in here. We should interview him. That'd be good.
Yeah, Chad is a friend of mine, so that would be super awesome. He's a great dude.
Yeah, I think Chad's got a really unique thing that he's doing there, and he's learned a lot. He also needs some. I guess maybe he can come on the show and say this, but he also needs some help too. Like he can't do it. Excuse me, he can't do it all on his own. I think he's looking for some help here and there. So if you're out there and you're like really down to help out with GitTip, and he doesn't call it Git Tip, he calls it GitIp.
Yeah.
Anybody know that?
Yeah.
He had a great tweet recently. He said that he's not trying to create, he's not creating GitTip. He's creating the community that's creating GitTip, basically.
Yeah.
So everything, and he's trying to run like the world's first open source company. So all this stuff is public information.
Yeah.
And there's a GitHub issue for literally every decision that needs to be made. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I got one issue, maybe two issues in there, and they're not actually issues. I think that's kind of a misnomer when it comes to GitHub issues because they're not all issues. Some of them are actually helpful things. It's kind of like a little off topic, but it's kind of like in Facebook where the nomenclature is like, and somebody's grandmother dies. You don't like that, right? You kind of like frown that. That's a bummer.
Yeah, I think GitHub kind of has embraced that because the categories and stuff when you create an issue doesn't just have to be like it can be a feature request. It doesn't just have to be like a bug. So
yeah, man, yeah. So I guess we've talked about GitHub. We've talked about Pair With Me. I know this year for the changelog has been pretty amazing to me because I think before the move from Tumblr to WordPress, we had like maybe 750 posts roughly, and that's like since 2009. And since this year's launch, I think we've bypassed. I think we've gone past like 110 or 120 new posts since the new year. So like we're already like cruising. So we keep at this pace. We're it's not so much about even more content either. I think what I always hear from people, at least like I just came back from LessConf and a couple other conferences, and the thing I always hear about the changelog, and this is definitely something we've always tried to push into the editorial stream, is not so much more. It's all about quality versus quantity. But this year has been pretty amazing in terms of like y'all stepping up, and I call it scanning your sectors, right? Like so, Steve, you're posting more things about the recent thing with Postgres. Changes to Rails and some new, uber new stuff around Rust. Andrew, you've been posting things around JavaScript. You posted stuff about Twitter's flight. Jerod, you've been posting all sorts of things about unique JavaScript things as well. But I kind of call it like us scanning our sectors and like reporting back to this community of software developers about like what is unique and what is kind of I guess is the word cool or is the word useful?
I think magical is a good word.
Magical, yeah, like a little magical thing there.
Whimsical. Yeah.
Whimsical. But so who wants to take the next lead in terms of like what we've covered recently that's been pretty unique and fascinating to you? Don't raise your hand all at once.
You guys said you want to talk about the Rust stuff, so we have to talk about it at some point. So if nobody else wants to go first, then
do it. Take it over. Go ahead, Steve.
So basically, Rust is awesome, and you all should use it. So I post about it. Done.
Did you see Armin's talk at RuPi on Rust?
No, I think I was out of the room for that one. Okay. But I heard some stuff about that talk. I'm trying to remember. That was like so long ago.
Yeah.
But, so if you don't know, and for everyone who's listening, Rust is a new programming language from Mozilla. It's been around for a couple years now, but it's only started to been a real project at Mozilla for the last year or two. It's currently had its 0.6 release relatively recently, which is an awesome release because it has eliminated most of the things that are not going to be in the 1.0 version of the language. So this should be the last release where code will actually change significantly between releases. And basically the elevator pitch for Rust is the speed of C++, the concurrency with Erlang, and the type safety of ML. Or safety in general, but part of that sort of being types with that. So,
and semicolons.
And semicolons, although they're optional, they mean something. So you don't always need semicolons, actually. But, yes. So I'm super psyched about it. They're writing a browser engine in it called Servo. That's sort of the Rust compiler is written in Rust, and Servo is written in Rust. So those are the two big projects that are making sure that the language evolves to meet actual needs, as opposed to like fantasy dreams, and it's pretty cool. So
I read somewhere about something Mozilla wanted to roll Rust into something. Do you know what I'm talking about? With I don't know if it was with Firefox or there was something they wanted to eventually roll Rust into.
Well, yeah. So basically, Mozilla has sort of been saying that, Servo is just an experiment. We just happen to make a web browser, and we happen to be rewriting a new browser engine in this new programming language we're writing. No, our C++ isn't terrible and unmaintainable. We're not making a new programming language so we can rewrite everything. But basically, yeah, they announced a partnership with Samsung to Samsung contributed an ARM backend for Rust. And so the idea is that Servo is sort of becoming a more real project. It's still very much research, but basically that might be the core of new Firefox someday on the 5-year timescale.
Right.
That's
for anyone that is hearing about it, I highly recommend reading Rust for Rubyist. That is an active work with Steve Klabnik. So he's. That's kind of how I got introduced to Rust, and it's a real short, easy read, and it's available on GitHub, and just check it out, and we'll post a link to it in the show notes. We're doing show notes, right? I would assume.
100%, man.
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just making sure. I don't want to just say, I'll post a link to it in the show notes, and then we don't do it. But highly recommend Rust for Rubyist. It's kind of my little intro into Rust, and it was a very, very easy read, well written, but definitely kind of shows you some cool conceptual ideas, and you kind of, I don't know if you're like me, I read the first couple chapters and I was like, this is kind of everything that seemed to make me angry in the C world. This kind of it doesn't feel like that. So definitely cool. Check it out.
I should mention the for Rubyist basically means that you're not a system programmer. If you don't know Ruby, there is 5 lines of Ruby in the book or whatever. So it's You need to be explained what pointers and memory are, is sort of the point of for Rubyists. Anyway, if you're not a Rubyist, you should still read it. That's what I'm trying to say.
I have this new theory that Python 2.7 is going to become the new C. Because it's the because right now everyone's on Python 3 or not, no one's on Python 3 yet. Everyone's moving to it, and Python 2.7 will be the most modern, unchanged language because it's never going to change. There's never going to be another release of it ever. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
When was Python 3's official release date? Do you know?
Oh, it's been out for 5 years, but it's been slowly getting better and getting more usable. And 3.3, which just came out this year, is the first one that is marked as ready for production, basically.
Wow.
So it'll be really interesting because I feel like if you want to build something for true longevity, this is a modern language that will literally never change in any way. So it'll be kind of cool if it works. We'll see.
So, Kenneth, what do you recommend for people who are, maybe have some experience in Ruby? On the changelog, a lot of the people that we have are kind of Ruby. So where do you recommend people kind of jump into Python and get started with it?
You mean what version or just in general?
Just how to learn it in general. What are some projects, to kind of keep an eye on, that kind of thing?
So I have a project called python-guide.org, The Hitchhiker's Guide to Python. I'll paste the link in.
That's an awesome name.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of Douglas Adams.
I think you had I've got my towel in your Twitter bio for a while there too, didn't you?
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I'm a fruit who always knows where my towel is.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, man.
The project aims to be like a guide, basically, like to become a good Python developer, and it's the same with most languages. We're really good about documentation, but there's all this tribal knowledge that you kind of build over time on what is best practice and what isn't. So the goal of this project is to like serialize all that mental knowledge that people acquire and try to get it written down. So it's like, if you want to do web development, here are the 2 frameworks you should look at, not here are the 20, here are the 2 ones that people actually use, that type of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems like every language kind of has its quirks like that, and it's something you definitely learn. Like I was just sharing, about Ruby specifically with some friends of mine that come from a more of a PHP background, and it's like, yeah, Ruby's great because the conventions and all this and that, but you got to kind of learn them. Oh, don't do that. That sucks. Like, don't try and do anything like that, and you kind of learn it as you go, and that's like the frustrating thing. It's like I wish there was an easier way for me to kind of share all my knowledge with everyone that I've picked up over the years, but I think tribal knowledge is probably the best way to put it. You just kind of you follow the people on Twitter that are kind of sharing the knowledge, and you just try and pick up as much of it as you can.
Yeah,
so that's what this book is doing, Kenneth?
Oh, what was that?
That's what this book is doing a little bit with what Andrew's talking about, where you can just kind of step in and share a little bit of wisdom, and it kind of lives throughout the book.
Basically, yeah, and it's not really in book form yet. It's more of it's just a big like documentation site.
Yeah.
The goal eventually is to get it printed and have it printed at cost, because I know a lot of people like to learn from books. Yeah. I'm not one of those people.
Might be a fun Kickstarter to do. I don't want to jump that horse or not, but that'd be kind of like. It seems like that would be a perfect candidate for something like Kickstarter.
Yeah, I think. Oh, maybe. Yeah, let's see. What were you going to say, Steve? Because you've been experimenting with this, right?
Yeah, so, I only read physical books, basically. So I'm a super big fan of the physical book world. I'm currently writing 3 self-published books and 1 for a publisher. There's sort of advantages and disadvantages to both sides of those things. But I do really like physical books. I've not gotten any of my self-published books printed in physical paper yet because they're not ready for it. They're all sort of like pre-release being worked on. So like Rust for Rubyus is like 52 pages, right? So it's still a little too small for like a real physical book, although it would be okay. Same thing with the Hypermedia book is currently around 70 pages. So I want to make it a little thicker before I bother to submit it somewhere. But Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to O'Reilly and a few other companies too, and they actually do consider, like, even if you have a book that is like Creative Commons, they can still publish it. There's ways to do that, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I've talked with a couple publishers about that kind of thing too. So yeah, totally, they're open to it at least.
Yeah, which surprised me.
Totally surprising. It's one of those awkward moments where there's a transition in the topics. Jerod, why don't you step up and lead the next one? I know you've been pretty active. So Jerod's one of our most newest contributors to the changelog, and he's come out of the gun just shooting, man. He's got guns blazing.
Yeah, I've been writing for the changelog for a couple months now, and I can't really spot a trend in my own projects that I submit. I mostly do JavaScript and Ruby development. I also do a little bit of Python here and there, and some Objective-C. But most of the stuff that I found that I've been submitting is tools, things that make whatever you're working on easier. And just looking through my list of recent postings, a couple that are cool that I posted. I think the Git Gutter project. I don't know if you guys saw that. Which started off as a Sublime Text 2 plugin that basically puts Git diffs in the gutter of your editor, which is a pretty cool project. I thought the really interesting piece about that was, the old my browser can do that too wars.
Does it do that as you're typing, basically?
You can do it as you type, and if I found that starts to have performance issues.
Yeah,
so then you can just do
highly
it
don't recommend that.
Yeah, on save. On save works, and so it's cool. But what's really cool is like right after that there was a Vim port, then there was an Emacs port, then there was a I don't know, was it like a Notepad++ port? Might have been.
Yeah, I've been using the Vim port of it, and it's cool. Like I really think it's neat, and it's actually, there's a lot of tools that you can get where it's like, hey, this is cool because I can do it, not because it actually helps me accomplish a goal. And I kind of felt maybe Git Gutter would kind of be that, but as I've used it, like I've actually found myself, my eyes can jump to where I'm editing a lot easier in Vim when I see those little diffs. Now, I've actually experienced some performance problems more than just on save. Like if I have, like let's say I have a file, a copy or something, and I swap out tons of copy. Like the more and more diffs that I get in one particular file, it starts to drag pretty heavily. And I haven't quite figured out what it is because some big files don't do it, some do, but there's something that's happening where it'll start to drag, and I have to turn it off, and it's that's kind of annoying. But it's a really cool project. Like I've found myself actually thinking, the Vim one specifically, this is actually useful, and it's actually helping me accomplish a goal, not just a you put it, Jerod, hey, my browser can do that too type of a thing. So it's kind of cool. Like I was glad you brought that one up. That was a neat one.
Yeah, the thing that I found out, my concern right away was, is this just going to become annoying over time, and I'll just turn it off? And I've actually found that what it does is it kind of prompts me to commit more often and to make smaller commits, which was always a goal for me, when collaborating, is to have your commit, be as small and concise as possible. So just seeing those annoying little, pluses and minuses in the gutter reminds you that, okay, maybe it's time to, to get this stage clean. So it's cool stuff.
Right. So one thing I wanted to bring up about Jerod is, him and I have been talking. I guess, Jerod, you're one of the first people that we've brought on to write that, you had come to know Win, or somehow you knew Win, but, neither Stack nor I really knew you, and so you're kind of the guinea pig for a lot of the stuff that we're doing new. And it's been kind of fun. Like, we're changing, some of how the changelog works. Like, we're changing, obviously it's not on Tumblr anymore. It's now it's a WordPress blog. So we're having to figure out how can we let authors write? What are we gonna do? So Jerod gets to be the guinea pig that has to, kind of play along and kind of learn with us. And just to kind of say publicly, man, you've been doing a great job at it, and it's been. We're kind of glad that we don't have somebody that is kind of fighting us, and it feels like you're working with us on it. And so that's something that I know Stack's glad for. I'm glad for too.
Oh, thanks. I'm having fun. I mean. One of the reasons why I wanted to write for the changelog was because I was a long-time listener of the podcast. I think, in fact, Adam, wasn't it just a podcast, and then there wasn't really a blog like there is now? It was just kind of like...
Yeah, the blog kind of grew over the years, honestly. I think that's why it was always... yeah, exactly. Because if I talk about the changelog to people that know the changelog, they're like, oh, yeah, I listened to it. And I'm like, well, what about read it? Do you read it?
Right.
And they're like, oh, I don't know. Should I read it? How can I read your podcast? I'm like, it's it's a blog, too. We're, the whole reason why... It's kind of funny the way the name even come about, because I was like, the name changelog is really neat. Just in general, and I'm like, it'd be really cool to have a podcast where we just looked at something open source and just talked about its changelog. From version to version, you see things change, and you wonder why. Why did that code move here? Why did they totally rip out this feature? Why did they add this feature? And all this has evolved since 2009 too. But for a long time, it was just a podcast, and we didn't really. I think we blogged, but it didn't really have the direction that I think it has now. And that's why Kenneth and Steve and Jerod and Andrew, you guys stepping up, and the other writers that are that we're working on to come on board. It's why it's so important to truly scan your sectors and report the things back, because y'all have fans out there that look up to you and whatnot in programming and in software development. And it's kind of an honor to help them learn and help lead them in the right directions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I was a long time reader and just getting finding new projects through the changelog. And when it started to get a little bit quiet, I got concerned, and I thought, well, I can pitch in if they need help. So it's been exciting, and it's been a good time.
I was reading those comments there. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's OIF_vet, whenever I type in TH into my browser, the changelog and the industry are my top suggestions. Nice.
Wow.
Nice.
The changelog is mine.
Nice.
He's using the changelog nightly build.
Yeah. So
apparently, all American airline flights are grounded right now. They have a nationwide computer outage.
They're supposed to be back. I saw.
I thought they're supposed to be
really?
back up by 5 Eastern. So
That's crazy.
I didn't even hear about it.
See, that's why I never fly them.
There you go. I just flew with Southwest and I loved it. One of the first few times I've flown Southwest. If I flew it before, I don't remember it. Because sometimes when I go...
Well, you would remember. They take it... They're very chill compared to most airlines.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
They actually treat you like a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew, you also mentioned a comment in the IRC. I almost want to call it a chat room, but IRC, that we did have the handle Changelog Show on Twitter for a very long time. And then Alex Dunne, who, if you don't know Alex Dunne, he is most famous for his, what's it called again? Pre-mailer. It's a Ruby gem, but basically it'll take HTML and CSS and munch it together to kind of set it up for email, which is really neat if you have a Ruby. And I think we use it at Pure Charity still, don't we, Andrew?
I don't know that we're actually using it anymore in production, but it's horrible practice. But the gem is still there.
Horrible practice.
Like we still have the gem there, even though I don't think we're using it. Horrible practice on our part,
I
not
see.
on Pre-Mailer's part.
I thought we still used it because we keep a separate style sheet and a separate HTML document for the email that goes out, and Pre-Mailer basically takes those two and puts them together. It inlines all those styles, so you don't have to be a...
we are using Pre-Mailer. Yeah, you're right.
So Alex Dunne, he had the changelog for a long time, and he had it in all caps too. So if every once in a while you see anybody tweet to the changelog in all caps, it's like one of his old friends thinking that we're still him. But so we used to be Changelog Show, because you're right, Jerry, when you said we started out as a podcast. It's like the very first domain we registered to start the changelog was changelogshow.com, and then we smartened up and we're like, the changelog's better.
Did the opposite of what Facebook did.
Yeah, and we added who's going to get changelog.com though? I mean, that's...
I wonder what it is.
What is it?
I don't know.
Let's find out. I don't.
Houseofdistraction.net, it says when you go there.
You guys are braver than me.
Oh my
typing
God.
Random URLs.
I know, Steve. This seems like a little bit of a hypermedia API here. It's just links to follow,
Yeah.
It's a puzzle.
and it's a. When you were asking what happens if you play the feed live while you're recording, I think that was Jerod that asked that. Houseofdistraction.net is that thing. It relinks you to houseofdistraction.net.
Weird.
I'm looking up the Who is now. It'll probably be like a Fielding guy, Church of Fielding. Never mind.
Yeah, never mind. So, is there any trends? I mean, let's pick up the conversation again. Is there any trends out there that's been, I guess, going on? Maybe even just here in 2013. That's kind of like across the entire landscape, not language specific. Just kind of agnostic across the whole entire landscape of software.
I'm pretty excited about a new project that DocCloud's been doing called Docker.
Oh yes,
Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's kind of like what Heroku does. With basically Heroku is built on LXC containers for isolation, and Docker is a way to do that yourself. Basically, they kind of package up all the hard work of making your own LXC containers.
Cool.
Pretty awesome.
We want to get him actually on a future show to talk about that project, because it was really unique to just like see what they're doing. We did cover that. I mean, I covered it, but it's so beyond my minuscule brain to even truly cover, Linux containers and all that good stuff. It's a bit beyond me, but I could definitely tell it was like bleeding edge technology.
Yeah, and then the Canonical team is also working on a project called Juju, which allows you to. They're going to try to kind of compete with I guess Chef and Puppet and things like that. And the really cool part about it is that it'll allow you to deploy locally to LXC containers, basically. So there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in that space.
It seems like a lot of these companies that, that traditionally are in the area that, would have been more about enterprise technology and stuff, are embracing the open source. And it's been really cool to kind of with even with like the GitIps of the world and things like that, to see companies, trying to figure out what you were saying, Kenneth, like sustainability with open source, and how do we as a company, kind of make money and do open source and this and that. So that's something that I've been kind of, I guess, excited about, and just kind of a trend that seems like a very positive one that's cool to watch.
Steve, I recall you blogging about, and I can't recall if it was a true rant or not, but it seemed like the tone of your blog post back in the day was a little ranty and a little bit of anger, but you were talking about burnout.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if that was a blog post, but I definitely have been more and more interested in the idea of burnout. There's one of the guys who's been around Rails for a very long time, Michael Kaz, some last name, I don't know, we call him Kaz, has a tweet where he basically says, like, in order to be an open source for multiple years, you either need to become a misanthrope or get burned out. And I think it's very true. You can see a lot of people that are big name contributors getting burned out by abuse from users, among other things. And so that's something I'm seeing that we're like possibly going to see more of, or we at least need to have a conversation about the scalability of open source maintainers. There's a comment on let's see, what is it? It's Jeremy Ashkenaz's copy scripts. There was a specific comment at an issue where someone brought up a new feature, and Jeremy sort of closed it sort of tersely, and this person got mad, and he sort of wrote this big comment. I'll paste it into the IRC, and we'll have it in the show links, about like how people that are, because of the asymmetry involved with maintaining a popular open source project and then using a popular open source project, the communication gets a little mixed up, and sometimes users can feel like they're being ignored, and maintainers can feel like they're being abused. So nobody wins, and it's something that we're, as open source sort of scales up and out, we're going to need to figure out how to manage this like problem. So yeah,
it's funny you mention this because when I was like this past weekend, we went out to Panama City at the gracious invite of Alan Branch and Stephen Bristol, who run us everything. Yeah, and great conference. I mean, the best, absolute the best conference of any conference. But Robbie Russell happened to be there, who's I guess he's famous for Planet Argon and his work with Postgres and a bunch of other stuff, but he's even more famous potentially from Oh My ZSH and his widespread adoption of ZSH and whatnot. But I happened to have a quick chat with him as we were standing in line for the Doom Buggies, because at LessConf you don't just hear people speak, you actually ride Doom Buggies, which is super awesome. But he's like, yeah, the changelog really just jacked up my life. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I released Oh My ZSH, and I came on the show, and Kenneth, it was me and you on that show, actually, that talked to Robbie. And he's like, yeah, I went into that show with like almost no issues, and I came out of that show with like 100, and I couldn't keep it less. Or
I think the big takeaway from that show for him was that he was trying to keep the pull requests under 125.
Yeah. And then like it sprawled up to like one of the most popular repositories on GitHub for a while there, and it might still be there. I don't watch that. I don't really care about those stats, but he was like, yeah, he's like, you know what? I want to come back on the changelog, and I want to talk about how open source, Oh My Z, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was like very passionate about coming on the show and talking about, just basically what you said, Steve, which is like this burnout, and even back to what you were talking about, Andrew, with like sustainability of a project. Like you get this maintainer and no one else wants to step up and help out, or they just expect to just spat out feature requests and not actually get a chance to like step in and sling some code.
The hardest part when you're working on a project is using it.
Yeah. I don't have any major projects like Oh My ZSH, but I've got a couple smaller ones that are like in the hundreds range of watchers and forks and stuff like that. And I've become a bad maintainer. I don't watch them anymore because I'm just too busy. Yeah. But thank God my software is not quite as critical as some of these other softwares out there, because I'd be like, people would be finding my house and breaking in and taking me out.
Yeah,
Rescue
I guess
has...
that's like...
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I guess it's like the double-edged sword of open source is like you tend to work on it on the side, and you're trying to do something that you want it to be successful. You want it to be something that is useful, but like the more useful it becomes, the more people use it, the higher the demand to improve it gets. And if you're doing it on the side, it's kind of a struggle to keep maintaining it. But that's where we encourage people. Like, that's the beauty of open source, is if you find something wrong or if you want a feature, there's nothing to stop you from implementing that feature. And so, it's kind of like you get both sides of it.
Did we lose somebody on the call?
Looks like we may have lost Kenneth.
Kenneth seems like he might be out.
Kenneth, you might be able to come right back in if you're listening. I don't think you're listening because you were talking, but let me see if I can pull Kenneth back in. And that's what happens with Skype. Oh, it could be his internet. So if you hear some screeching or squawking in the background, that's Kenneth trying to come back in with his flaky internet.
Anyone interested in this topic of burnout should also watch this amazing talk by Fat, one of the guys who started Bootstrap. He wrote a blog post and gave a talk at .js called "What is Open Source and Why Do I Feel So Guilty?" About Bootstrap and its issues, and so it is also very relevant on this maintainer burnout situation. So.
Dude, what a URL too. He's got a .xxx URL.
Yeah, don't type fat.xxx. Make sure you type byfat.xxx. That's all I will say on that URL.
Man.
That's crazy right there.
But his blog is awesome, and you should read every single post in it because they're amazing. But that one's relevant to the topic at hand.
I've been meaning to actually listen to that. I got through the first little bit of it, only to the point where he was talking about how he was jet lagged getting there and how he wasn't like... He didn't really care how he said this talk or whatever, but I was like, I got to go back and listen to this. So thanks for reminding me to do that.
Totally, it's very.
I totally recall hearing about this, but never got a chance to actually sit through the whole thing. But just add that to my watch later, or read later, or something later. And I don't know if we lost Kenneth totally. I think we may have completely lost Kenneth. I will invite him again. It seems like we may have lost him. So when Kenneth comes back, we're about to close up the show here in a few seconds. So one thing that it's kind of neat, one thing that I think might work well is just if we can kind of go around the proverbial room and just plug something before we close the show. So we'll start with Andrew. Andrew, why don't you plug something cool that you found recently that is not on the changelog yet? And I put "yet" in parentheses for you.
So one thing that I intend to put on the changelog, and we've actually mentioned it in briefly, is the is it called Discourse? It's the project by Coding Horror. What is his name?
Yes.
From Stacoviak.
Jeff Atwood.
Jeff Atwood, and it's Discourse, and it's really like a project that's aimed at making community engagement, community conversations, community Q&A, kind of like a more than just a threaded environment, and it's a really cool open source project that it's still in beta, and there's not a ton on it, but I used it a little bit, and it's something that I think will grow, and I would like to see it grow. So it's called Discourse, and I think you should check it out.
We did cover that quickly. I think we had even a side chat about that, Andrew, where we were like, yeah, Discourse was kind of like a cameo in that blog post because it was the same fella, obviously. But his post was on why Ruby because he was coming from .NET, or not coming from .NET. Like I guess he's most fluent in .NET, but he was stating the case of why he chose Ruby for coding Discourse with that rather than like something .NET.
I mentioned it in passing once or twice too because they have done a lot of good open source work. I specifically wrote a post for the changelog about one of their tech leads being a hero. I think was the phrasing that I used, by like doing some really awesome performance analytics and then submitting patches upstream based on performance stuff. So yeah, Discourse has been around once or twice, but I don't think we've ever done a real post on it.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to that future post there, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
No pressure. All right, so let's turn it over to Jerod. Jerod, what's something you want to plug that you haven't posted yet?
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of JavaScript work. I've been getting deeper into the client-side frameworks, and most recently working on a project with AngularJS, and I'm just really, really enjoying that framework. So I'm hoping to cover some pieces related to that. If you're interested in learning, there's some tricky bits if you're just getting started. So there's a great site that has not interactive, but videos, tutorials called egghead.io. Very short little videos, screencasts that kind of uncover a lot of the tricky bits of Angular. So definitely worth checking out.
I will. I have not, but I will. You know, I'm actually speaking of that, I'm kind of in this limbo state. Like, I've always been a very diverse, I guess, technological person, but never a superhero in like one niche. I kind of like play a lot of different positions. So I've been trying for a couple of years not to like really learn JavaScript, but when I say try, I mean like here and there I'll read a book and kind of get started, and then it'll fizzle out. And then I kind of get busy with a different project that totally has nothing to do with coding, and like I do a lot of podcasting, and like at Pure Charity I'm a product manager, so it's like I've kind of lifted myself up from a lot of the different things at the bare metal that I used to do, and I just never get a chance to like truly pour into it. But I think one thing I'll plug is that I'm kind of breaking the rules, I guess, because I did post this, but it was Derek Sivers. He had and I like the guy. You know, speaking of LessConf, he spoke at the original LessConf back in 2009, and I was just floored with how cool that dude is. I mean, he is so freaking humble, and you wouldn't even think, I mean, not that he's any better than any of us in this room here, but, you know, he's just such a cool dude, and I've always just really respected his point of view and perspective on things, because he's just like a true life hacker, I guess. You know, he doesn't let a wall stand in front of him. He finds a way to knock it down, or go around it, or get over it. He doesn't let anything stop him from trying to pursue his dreams. But so when he posted that about how to better learn JavaScript, and mentioned those few books, which we'll post a link in the show notes, but if you're listening live, I'll add the link here in a couple of seconds to IRC. But that was a really cool thing. So
yeah, he did a blog post called "There's No Speed Limit to Life" that changed my life.
Is that right?
Yeah, some really cool stuff in there.
Wow.
And he wrote a really good book I recommend, too. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called Anything You Want.
And so I guess that's Kenneth Reitz back. Dude, I didn't even know you got back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I was like, I thought we lost you. And I'm like, that sounded like Steve for a second there, but no, that's Kenneth.
I blame Microsoft.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. So we'll make sure we link that in the show notes, too. So, Kenneth, make sure you post that link in IRC so we can scoop up that link and add it to the show notes. But who wants to go next? Who wants to add something next? Kenneth, I guess since you're speaking, you can in your back.
Sure. I assume we're talking about just the takeaways for the things that we're interested in this week.
Yeah, like plug something that you haven't posted at the changelog yet, or you want to, that maybe you haven't yet.
I can tell you about a project I'm interested in that I'm working on. I'm trying to create a project that is going to be the opposite of the 410 gone situation, basically. So you have like Y and Mark Pilgrim and these people that decide to like rage quit from the internet, which is totally fine, and I completely respect that decision. But it made me start thinking about like, you know, what happens when you're no longer there, right? It's a really important topic that people don't consider a lot. So I was trying to think, you know, if the content I'm like publishing, I'm making code, I'm making projects, blog posts, I'm a photographer, you know, and all these things live on the internet. What happens when I'm gone and the hosting bills aren't paid anymore?
Right.
So I'm working on this project that kind of sucks everything in, puts it all into S3 as like this flat file type thing, and then automatically puts everything on archive.org that I'm really excited about. It's called Blackbox.
Nice.
And I'm hoping to start working on that more soon. I was really into it, and I was going to start blogging about it, and then the Aaron Swartz incident happened, so I wanted to wait a while. But yeah, I'm really interested in those things right now, and it's been a lot on my mind lately.
That is really neat. Yeah, I mean, I remember when, I can't remember was it Mike? No, not, who was it that a couple of years ago like just disappeared? Not Y, but somebody else.
Mark Pilgrim.
Mark Pilgrim.
Yeah. And so is it stemming from that? Is that what you're talking about?
Basically, I mean, it's not the reaction to that. That's just a good example of what I don't want to happen,
Right.
basically. But, his was intentional. But if you think about it, like, there aren't that many developers who have like naturally passed, I guess. Or,
Yeah.
It's a touchy subject, but basically, I'm not going to be around in 80 years. What'll happen to all the things I've created?
Mm-hmm.
It's like preservation.
Exactly.
A museum of sorts.
Yeah, I also do a lot of work with the archive team, which is in association with archive.org. We have it's called the preservation of what is it? I can't remember. Distributed attack of preservation or something like that. We have a lot of fun. So like we're backing up Postgres right now because they're going to shut off 9.3 million blogs.
Wow.
And they have like I think a week left or something like that. And that's a lot. A lot of people poured, years and years into their Postgres blogs, and they're just going to turn it all off. It's crazy. So,
were you involved with the guys who backed up GeoCities?
Yeah, that's the archive team.
That's the archive team.
Yeah, and MobileMe, a bunch of stuff like that. So right now we're working on FormSpring because they're shutting down, and Postgres is the biggest one. It's a lot of fun. If you go to, I think, archiveteam.org. There's a bunch of information on the projects, and a lot of the stuff is written in Python. It's pretty cool. It's about because this stuff is really historical and was important because you have people that like their GeoCities sites, like they maybe their son passed away or something, and like they had photos from a photographer that were on GeoCities or on MobileMe, and those are like the only thing they have left, and then they go one day and they're gone. So having these things recorded is extremely important.
There is a downside, though, in that if you did dumb stuff in your childhood, it is still up there and now is being archived instead of going away.
It's true.
That's true.
So it's not a universal good thing to save everything that's ever hit the internet. That's all I'm saying.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So don't go search for Steve Klabnik on the internet.
Definitely don't do that.
Well, that's why I can never say this word. Anonymity.
Anonymity.
Yes, that
Anonymity.
word. It's extremely important, which is why, because, if you've had a certain situation, it can often be very dangerous to have your name associated with things online. So, I don't know.
It's kind of funny how everybody stepped in to say the word, too, for you.
Can you say it again? I really can't do it.
Anonymity.
Anonymity. There we go.
Kind of sounds like, it reminds me of Nemo.
Yeah, an anemone.
All right, speaking of Nemo, Steve, last but not least, what's been on your mind, man?
I'm pasting this link into the IRC, and we'll put it in the show notes, I'm sure. But me and a friend started a mailing group called Philosophy in a Time of Software, specifically to discuss the intersection of philosophy and technology at whatever level of understanding you have of philosophy. So we have about 200 people, and it's like a relatively low traffic mailing list, but sometimes we get good discussions going. So if those things interest people at all, that's my pitch/pick for a thing that might be interesting to people. So. And
did you post a link? No,
I put one in the IRC. It's a Google group.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Let me. I was responding to somebody else quickly.
It is all good.
Philosophy in a Time of Software.
Yeah, it's a Jerod reference, but there's a lot of really cool, really smart people, and we're sort of like in that startup stage where like I don't want to run over the list, but I'm trying to generate some content. So we have some reasonable posts that have had some discussion and some that have less, and we're working on it. So
is this the only place this exists, or is there a website or anything like that?
This is the only place that it currently exists. If it continues to build, maybe we'll make a website or do some other stuff with it. But it's always hard to bootstrap a project, right? So even when you have a bunch of 100 people reading, everyone's busy, and it can take a while sometimes. So it's slow going, but it's been useful so far. So,
what's this one that you posted, the Meme Hustler?
That is an article. That is a 25,000 word article on Tim O'Reilly. Actually,
I read that. Yeah,
it's very interesting. Mostly because I enjoy the fact that it makes me viscerally uncomfortable, since I love Tim O'Reilly and it is critical of Tim O'Reilly. And so I always like to read things that directly challenge my initial understanding of things. So I found it very enlightening on a number of things. So,
What's this? I want to write software that helps kill people.
I read that they just that is a grabby title, but it actually is not.
But it's totally legitimate. Like software that I have open source is used by a number of organizations that are terrible. So like if you have ever gotten a patch into Ruby or Python, for example, your software is being used by in this particular instance, your software is being used by Palantir, and the government is using Palantir to decide who to kill. So you have contributed to software that has killed a human being.
I see.
Which is a very complicated, ethical discussion, basically, about what the ethics involved. One of the interesting things is that, the free software definition does not allow for use restrictions. So you're actually not allowed to say that software cannot be used to kill people. And in fact, it's funny. So JSLint is a linting program for JavaScript, right? And JSLint's license says JSLint may not be used for evil. And IBM wanted to distribute JSLint with something that it gave out. And so IBM had to actually contact the author and ask to pay for a license that did not include that cause. And so the author wrote this blog post that said, like, I am giving IBM the license to use JSLint for evil. Because, that's not legally defined, so they could be liable if someone decided. And IBM has collaborated with the Nazis before, so arguably they have done evil things even with software. So, they got to get that clause out of there or whatever. So it's very complicated. This is one of the examples of the intersection between the two fields is like, what is ethics? Like, what research in the field of ethics can we apply to our current situation to, know that what we're doing feels good, et cetera. So,
and just for me, from my perspective, following Steve Klabnik on Twitter, it's at Steve Klabnik. He will be very open to entertain these discussions if you want to talk further about them with him. So
totally,
it's funny. What's the guy's name? And I feel like I'm even an idiot for not even remembering it. But last name Crawford. Super well.
Douglas Crawford.
Totally got his first name, but back in the day when Wynn and I went to I think it was the original Texas JS actually, Wynn got a chance to chat with him, and that's one thing that Douglas talked quite a bit about was just software being used for evil. I'm pretty sure that it's in that episode. He talks quite heavily about it. Just FYI.
Well, it's just one of those things that you don't think about, You live in a bubble, you live in a little capsule that you don't really realize what an impact you could be doing would have, not just the intended audience, but everyone in the world has access to this. So what might it be being used for?
I today got a Nazi's website removed from the internet because his hosting provider does not allow for hate speech, and so they wrote a Rails app or whatever that allows you to set up political drives to collect campaign money. And so, they don't audit every single customer they have, right? And so I just sent them an email and was like, "Yo, by the way, one of your customers is a Nazi. You should know that." And this totally happens. We build software that's used. Software is just a tool. You can use it for any end, and lots of people want to use it for bad ends. So,
do not use software for evil. Long story short.
TLDR.
Yes, sir. So that's so the changelog is back. You guys excited? I'm excited. I feel like we've officially launched the blog now that the podcast is officially back. For a while there, I wanted to get it out right away, but I knew we kind of had to have this time frame. So Andrew got a nice little mic set up, plus he's moved, and he had to get settled in a bit, and life's been kind of chaotic for me as well. But if you're listening now, every Tuesday, live at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, every Tuesday at that time, you can hopefully bet your life on it. If not, we'll be really sad. And you can make it happen by becoming a member. That'd be really awesome to help us out, keep this train rolling. And if you happen to want to become a writer for the changelog, you can reach out to us. You do have to get a personal invite right now from somebody who's already a writer for the changelog, so that's kind of the only caveat right now. So
we do accept bribes.
Bribes can happen. So, and the only reason for that is just to keep the initial writing staff kind of tight knit. It's also heavily tied to membership. So the more members we have, the more writers we can bring on to cover more awesome open source software. So that's the easiest way I can say it. But that has been the first new changelog. So everybody want to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Peace.
Au revoir.
I'm outta here.